My guest is Leonard McMahon. Leonard is a doctoral candidate in theology at the Graduate Theological Union at Berkeley, exploring the connections between spirituality, theology, and politics. Leonard holds a master's in religious studies from UC Santa Barbara and an MDiv from Harvard Divinity School. He's interested in public theology and improving civic engagement through his consulting firm, Common Ground Dialogue. He brings politically diverse citizens into deeper conversation for the sake of our democracy. And I've posted a link to Common Ground Dialogue in the show notes. Thank you very much for joining us, Leonard.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Ian. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Now, just based on the name of your consulting firm, I know that you, and also just through our conversation, you have been influenced by contemplatives like Howard Thurman, also Father Keating. And I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit about your understanding of contemplative practice, what it means to you, and what form that takes.
Yes. So three influences really, and there are others, but three main influences that sort of guide my work, our work at Common Ground Dialogue. One is, as you named, Howard Thurman, and this is where we get the name. This is where we get sort of the vision, I suppose, for Common Ground Dialogue, and not only because he wrote a book with that title, but because his whole theology was about bringing religion to the public square and
Mm.
into public life. Second, though, Thomas Keating gives us the method. Uh, so there's a kind of there's a centering prayer that obviously he promotes, but the centering prayer sinks down. There's a psychological unloading that I could talk about a little bit later that happens when you're practicing this kind of contemplative practice. And what is our goal is to bring some skill to that process. And I can get more into or maybe I should get more into
Yeah, just get
exactly
right
what we
into
do.
it. Yeah, why not?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Uh, so at Common Ground Dialogue, what we seek to do is to use a contemplative practice that comes from the classical era. Actually, it's from the Greek and Roman era, and it has to do with a style of dialogue that was designed to bring a person into their better self. Uh, and so things like journal writing and letter writing and things like this are classical sources for our method. But what happens in the Christian era, when as you know, moves from the Greek to Roman to the Christian era, the interlocutor, right, the friend that I'm writing letters to, or the journal partner is no longer myself or a friend, it's God.
Mm.
And so that is becomes a real contemplative practice. Uh, and so what we do is we just take that and we try to update it for our current circumstances, meaning that we have a dialogical method that seeks to bring a person, and this is one at a time. We don't do this in groups. We do this one at a time, even though we might do a number of folks in a particular session. One at a time seeks to bring a person through dialogue into a place of sort of contemplative silence,
Hmm.
or using contemplative fewer words. So we ask a person, we start with their political opinion, and then we ask why that opinion is so important and what is so critical about that. And what happens is that as a person continues to sink down, they begin to realize that the ground that they thought was so firm, so solid, that gave them the justification for their political opinion, isn't quite that solid. It's very deep, very personal, very private, very intimate. And it takes some skill to do this because people will resist and they'll, not want to do the process. They want to shift gears, things like that. So we try to continue to keep people, just keep asking yourself why this matters so much to you, right? So it's past the level of values. I'll just
Right.
say that. Yeah. So a person might say, I'm interested in justice, or law, right? And that's not, and I say, well, yeah, but why do you care so much about justice and law? And slowly what happens is a person gets to a point where either they can't answer the question anymore, that's silence, or they just have just a few words and their whole tone softens. Again, we're not trying to change people's political minds here. What we do is we just simply try to get people to understand that the way to engage politically is with a softer touch than what they might expect.
And it sort of strikes me that when you're talking with these people, or just thinking about it myself, that there's a point where I think that I have an idea about a political position or a moral position, and it feels um, broader than just my own personal experience with it or personal opinion of it or
Yes,
understanding of it. But that this dialogical practice brings you, I guess, through a series of questions into a contemplative space that helps me understand how deeply personal it is, not some sort of ontological idea of truth about the morality of something. Is that?
that's correct. That's absolutely correct.
Mm,
And in doing so, we enable a person to take full moral responsibility for their public life, for their positions.
yeah.
See, because there's no longer any kind of, again, no justification, no longer any kind of external resource that you can rely on, right? There's no crutch that you can go and say, well, I'm doing this because of thus and so. No, it's you, and that's okay. See, there's a new confidence that comes in, and as you know, confidence, fides, trust, faith. There's a new trust that arises,
Hmm.
and with that trust is the ability to take responsibility for oneself.
And I've heard you talk about that in other places where you're talking about the need to take responsibility for your religious life. And
Yes.
again, that sort of struck me as kind of, well, it just took me a little bit aside because it was like, oh, well, the religious life is so personal, it's so intimate. Um, what does it mean? Like, what does that mean to take responsibility for the religious life?
Yeah.
Like,
I would
if this
say,
is just me being spiritual, like, why do I have to be responsible about, you know, being spiritual? I think I sort of understand what you're saying, but I just, I was like, oh, intriguing.
well, yes, in our cloisters, right, in our personal little rooms and our little spaces, certainly we're spiritual. But the minute we engage with another human being or the world outside of us, creation
Right.
in general, we have to take responsibility for what we do and what we say. This is in James. You have to guard your mouth. You have
Yeah.
to watch. So yeah.
Well, and I was even, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but when I read that, when I heard you say that, um, to me, it was almost like the spiritual process that I'm engaging in,
Mhm.
intentionally or unintentionally, is shaping my worldview
Yes.
and shaping, therefore, my relationship with other people. And
Yes.
so, if I'm not taking time, sort of contemplative time, thoughtful time, to
Mhm.
understand how my understanding of the worldview is changing my relationships or shaping my relationships, then I'm kind of walking through the world in an irresponsible way because I'm just not
Yes.
cognizant of it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I was just like, oh wow, that makes it makes meditation practice or whatever practice you're doing
Yes.
um, way beyond what you're trying to do to relieve your anxiety or have a deeper connection to God or anything like that.
Yes. Yes. No, absolutely. That is wonderful. You're absolutely correct. I mean, of course, the health benefits of contemplation are wonderful, right? People do it for stress relief and
Sure.
pain relief and all kinds of things. That's great. But as we know from the Christian spirituality tradition, I mean, these were people who took full responsibility for their way of being in the world. It's a whole transformative process, right? We're trying to become a certain kind of person. And as you say, it's uh, beyond any kind of any kind of any kind of particular goal or purpose or anything like that is beyond well-being. Let's put it like that.
Right.
It's a little, it's more than well-being, and it's not an escape. And that's really the key there. It's, remember, there's a real temptation to view contemplation as an escape, as a resource to get away from the world, when in its essence it's supposed to strengthen you to get back into the world, to do the work that you're called to do.
I used to have this Buddhist. I'm a Zen student, and I
Oh, yeah.
studied with this teacher who used to call it nirvana sickness, and like people who would shoot for that place of like no self and just wanting to be sort of released from the world. And the teacher was like, "That's not the end. That's like halfway. Like understanding no self is halfway. Then you have to go all the way back to, but I still work and move and act in the world, and my actions have uh, impact. You have to understand no self so that you
Yes.
can be free to act and impact the world in a way that makes it better.
Yes.
But you're not like, you can't just hang out in nirvana."
Exactly. 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 Yeah. This is
Mm,
not. This is not an escape hatch.
right.
And,
It's not an escape hatch.
yeah, and I can. It's understandable though, because in our modern or at least American consumer culture, you go to places to do this thing
Mm,
that is different from your daily life, right? It's kind of like,
right.
okay, I want to go. It's marketed a certain way in some cases, uh, but yeah, contemplate. You're supposed to bring a real intentionality to the practice.
And just sort of the way you just said that made me think one more step. Like very often now, we're sort of, as we're bracketing our spiritual life, as sort of we see the collapse of traditional religion, and
Yes.
you see people saying, well, this is my contemplative time or my private time or my meditation time, and then
Mhm.
this is like my work life. And something about the idea of being responsible for your religious life is like, actually, it's all
Yeah, it's
that time.
it's you, right?
It's
There's
you.
no and John Kabat-Zinn's the title of his great book, and wherever you go, there you are. I mean, it's
Yeah.
perfect because you're still there. It's still you. And Thomas Merton has a wonderful quote. I'm just going to paraphrase,
Mm.
where he says, don't go into contemplation simply because you like to be alone, because you'll take yourself with you. You'll take
Mm-hmm.
your attachments to the world with you. If you go in wanting to be transformed, then that's different. Then everything gets transformed. Your attachments to the world gets transformed. Your engagement with the world gets transformed. That's a different purpose. But if you are sort of misanthropically wanted to, and that's a little strong. But
Yeah,
if you
I
just
get
want
to
to
you
get
though.
away, yeah, get away from people,
Mm-hmm.
that you're bringing something into the practice that's going to do damage. It would be unproductive, certainly. Yeah.
Now, I liked this other, I was listening to you say you were sort of referencing Parker Palmer, who
Yes.
has this phrase where democracy is about holding tensions. And then you took it a step further, and I'm sort of paraphrasing what you said, but what you said was how well you can hold the tension is how healthy your democracy is. But then you
Yes.
went, if you if you don't work first on a contemplative process to deal with the tensions within ourselves, our effects to work with, or our efforts to work with other people uh, who are holding different positions, political positions, moral positions, they just sort of peter out.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about, why, I guess, why this is important to you in that way, and what you've given your life to this work, and I'm just
Yes.
the motivation for it.
Uh, Suffering. I think as a nation we're suffering right now. We have
Mm.
been for a while. In terms of motivation, I'm just
Yeah, truly.
picking up on that word that you're mentioning. And so I want to do what I can. I mean, I am who I am. I bring whatever gifts I have and privileges and talents and skills. So that's why I want to bring all this to the task of resolving the suffering that we're all going through, are all sides of the political spectrum.
Right.
You know, every
Yeah.
so I mean, we're all struggling in a way. And on a one-on-one level, certainly, you know, you can have rapport with people, we can dialogue, but when it comes to this national conversation, it seems to be there's a lot of stress. So Palmer uses the word tension, and I also I like to use the word uncertainty. And it's the same thing, really.
Sure.
But the ability to negotiate and navigate uncertainty. Democracy is based on uncertainty, right? It's a creative process. You just go forward as a group of people, deciding what you're going to do with the next iteration of whatever it is happening, right? I mean, there are decisions made, and then there's another cycle. There's another election. There's another appointment. There's another whatever it is generation. So it's all this uncertainty, and if you'll bear with me for a moment, where democracy goes wrong is when people try to grasp for certainty. They try and demand to stop the ongoing process of creation, creativity, and uncertainty. When you try to stop that, then the problems arise. So we can see some of that in our political life today. People saying, "Okay, no, this is the answer. We don't
Right.
need any other answer." You know, no, there we need to keep it going, keep the movement going. So uncertainty in the public life and uncertainty in the contemplative life. So we have the chance, we can practice this, right? We can prepare ourselves for the public life by practicing contemplatively. And it's the willingness in the contemplative practice to give up the control, to give up the demand for a result, to be open and available to God, to the Holy Spirit, et cetera, et cetera. Um, yeah,
Yeah. I feel like that the contemplative practice more than anything else has taught me uncertainty. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, and this is Brene Brown talks about this in her Power of Vulnerability TED
Mm.
Talk. You know, that that uncertainty is where you want to be. Faith, mystery, uncertainty, openness. These are it's just the better aspects perhaps of religion, religious practice, and so on, spirituality. But when those things get locked and they're frozen, and you're looking for guarantees and you're looking for absolutes and certain dogmas, and then well, it's okay. Yeah, even if
Hmm.
that happens, you can always come back
Hmm.
with every breath. With every breath, there's an opportunity to come back to uncertainty.
And I love the idea also of this dialogical process of like being engaged with someone, being open enough to actually hearing what they're saying, which would sort of loosen the hold of certainty on
Yes.
what what I think I believe.
Yes, absolutely. You and I know,
Mm-hmm.
of course, that one of the dangers of contemplative practice is a kind of navel gazing, right? There's a kind of
Mm-hmm.
self reifying.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, there's a performance aspect to it, and we're going through the motions, and and there's a search for a certain kind of feeling, like a warm fuzziness, that means that we're being contemplative right then.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, right? So we do a dialogical process and interlocution because having another person there has remarkable effects when you're trying to do
Mm.
this kind of searching process, because there is an accountability, right? You can't control the other person. The other person is just there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the other person is going to give a kind of honest feedback uh, to what you're experiencing, what you're going through. Say, are you sure? Is that really okay? Is that you, there's nothing else. That's the reason, or maybe have you thought about?
Right.
See, yeah, yeah, uh,
Now I wanted to shift us just a little bit, but I feel like it's in the same, in this line because,
mhm.
you know, we're this interview is really set to be released on the first Sunday in Lent.
Yes.
And the reading for that day is from Luke 4. It's about the temptation of Jesus.
Yes.
And he's gone to the wilderness. Uh, he was baptized by John in the Jordan, and then immediately the Spirit was like, "You got to go to the wilderness."
Mhm.
And when he was there, the devil or the adversary, however you interpret that experience, is offering him, fame, power, money. And I'm wondering how you see Lent as a theological practice, as a contemplative practice, and maybe even this reading in particular, uh, within the context of what you were just saying.
Yes, that story, the temptations of Jesus, is an exact analogy, a perfect metaphor for what I'm trying to get at here. You see Jesus doing, I mean, setting the standard, setting the model, right, for how to be in the world. The adversary, the devil,
Yeah.
the adversary, continues to try and tempt Jesus with certainty, with
Mm,
power, with guarantees, with control, with answers. You know, you can do this, and it's very it's very tempting, right? To tell somebody, yeah, you can do it
right.
if you would just reach out and ask, it shall be. Um, and what does Jesus say in response? No. Every time is no.
Right.
I'm going to rely on God alone. I stay uncertain.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, please, no, go ahead. I can see
No,
the
no,
reaction.
I agree. I was just going to look. I have that sort of reading pulled up, and I was just looking to see what exactly he said. But it's like, yeah, worship the Lord your God and serve only Him, and
Yeah.
you know, which on one level, I think people interpret that also as certainty, but that's not what you're saying here.
Oh no, no. See,
Yeah,
that's only if you know what if you have
no,
if you have a definite idea of what God is and what
yeah,
God's going to do.
right,
We don't have that kind of control, right? See,
right,
and it's difficult. This is the point. This is the part of the practice of what we do in Common Ground, to try and get people used to letting go of control,
right.
and that control can come in even in our contemplative practice. You know,
Yeah. And I think, I've heard you and I have talked before about the idea of the cataphatic and the apophatic, or like the
yes,
God of the what is known, right? The God of
yeah,
light and material and the statue, right?
yes,
And then
yes,
there's the apophatic God, which is the God of darkness, the God of I think of it as the God of the womb, where like
yeah,
there's no boundary, that no discernible boundary. You're just contained within this thing that is the holy darkness, or the holy, um,
yes,
it's a very cosmic God,
yeah, yeah.
but also unknown, which gives people a little bit of, can be discomfort, right? Because they're so used to the cataphatic God, the God of the known and
Yeah,
fixed.
absolutely. Yes, yes, exactly. We've got to uh, let God be God.
Let God be God. I
Yeah,
have a friend who talked about, he says, it's time to get to the God behind God,
exactly.
because we have
Yeah.
this image that we put, and he's like, yeah, but that's not the thing. It's the you got to go one more.
Well, you're a Zen person. I'm talking to a
Yeah,
Zen person here. Of course, you've heard the story. I don't know if it's a Zen story or just a general Buddhist story, but you know, if you walking on the road to enlightenment, you come across the Buddha,
yeah,
kill him,
kill him.
right, and then keep going
Yeah,
because that you can get held up. You can think you
yeah.
preach it.
You've
Yeah,
made the Buddha a certainty, and the Buddha is
yeah,
not a certainty,
absolutely.
right?
Emptiness, right? Emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's, I mean, the word in Christian theology is kenosis,
Right.
emptying yourself out
And it's
constantly.
funny. I feel like we just don't teach that much. Like
Yeah.
when you and I both were at HDS at the same time, I did not have a class on kenosis. Did you?
No, I did not. No.
And
unfortunately. Not,
and it's weird that we go to these sort of premier theology schools, and it's
yeah,
only later when you like somehow, because somebody, they're like, by the way, have you read this? And you're like, what? Why was this never shared? Like, why is kenosis not shared? Why is it not
yeah,
part of our curriculum just as religious people, do you think?
yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
I, do
Well,
you do you not? I mean, I think it's like I feel like it's all about, the God. We teach the God of control all the time, and we
sure. Yeah,
and to know the God of emptiness would go right in the face of all of this capitalist
yeah,
corporate structure or something. I don't know. I mean, that's my conspiracy. I'm putting on my tinfoil hat. That's my conspiracy hat, right? Like, we just don't teach it because I don't know. It doesn't work well in a
well, we live in the
society that
world of,
wants control.
yeah. I mean, uh, we live in a world of words. I mean, it's just the way
Mm,
life is. You can't. Yeah, and we get
true,
glimpses of the apophatic, and that's great, and that's enough to power an entire life. Right?
true.
It's just one experience, and we try to do liturgies and practices that try to prepare us for a gift of a glimpse of the apophatic again. But what I will say is that contemplative practice, and to my mind, is a way of constantly going to that edge. Right? You make yourself available as much as you can. I mean, this is a mandate, but make yourself available for apophatic experience. And you run along that edge. You try and live around closer to that edge than you do, sort of buried in the world of words and certainty and all that. It's trying to hover closer. That's what the contemplative lifestyles. That's what they offer. Try and get people to pull closer to the edge of not knowing.
And
I mean,
so,
it's hard.
yeah, go ahead.
So, it's hard to do a liturgy, an apophatic liturgy, right?
Right. Yeah.
It just wouldn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Sit in silence. So,
yeah, yeah,
when people are going through this period of time in Lent, and they're looking at this reading, and they're
yeah.
thinking about, what is actually happening when the adversary or the devil is talking about temptations, or like, how can that impact our contemplative practice right now? Thinking about the responsibility of, you know, what we're supposed to do with this religious life.
That's exactly. This is another way Jesus models for us in this case, you say Christian, contemplative life. They're taking responsibility. Jesus takes responsibility each time. He doesn't even. So the devil keeps
Mm,
saying, oh, the adversaries keep saying, God will do this for you. Jesus says, no, I'm going to, I rest on God, but I am taking responsibility. I let go of control. I don't demand that God do anything for me. I am fully responsible for whatever happens from here out. And the devil leaves him for a time. And that's what it says in the last bit, right? So this isn't a one shot deal. This is always a temptation.
that's true. I'm looking at it right now. He
Yeah,
departed from him until an opportune time. I don't know why I've never paid attention to that little last line.
yeah, yeah.
Right, because the adversary doesn't go away.
No,
There's
that's
nobody who's achieved any level of spiritual attainment where the adversary no longer appears.
Can I share a story just on this note?
Absolutely.
I've had the honor and the pleasure of seeing the Dalai Lama speak twice,
Mm.
twice in the past few years. And if anyone's ever experienced this, you probably recognize what I'm going to say. I have never been in the presence of another human being, even way in the back of a big stadium, right? I've never been in the presence of another human being who was so fully themselves.
Yeah.
And what I mean is so able and ready and willing to say, I don't know.
Right.
Uh, and and I say that to say that it's so tempting, right, to to not be in that place. Our world demands that we have control, that we have expertise, that we can manage things. Contemplative practice, in contemplative practice, we give that up.
Mm.
Give all that up. Uh, and we try for a moment to, as Jesus did in these temptations, just rely and be open to God alone. Um, and to say, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen when I sit down to practice. I
Hmm.
don't know. I have no goals here. I am here and available.
I love that.
Yeah.
Leonard, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Seeker's Table. This was a great conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Ian. It's just really a pleasure and an honor, and I am so proud of you and your work, and thank you for doing what you do.
I feel the same.